Every generation thinks they're the last. And history keeps laughing. From messianic mathletes to poultry with prophecy, this is the Hall of Fame for the most confidently incorrect end-of-the-world predictions ever made. Welcome to the apocalypse. That never came. 1. Let's kick things off in Victorian London with a guy named Dr. John Cumming, who was basically the 19th century version of a Nigerian prince email scam, but with more Bible verses and a fancy hat. He wrote a smash hit book claiming he'd crunched God's numbers and figured out the world's expiration date was 1864. People ate it up, selling their fine china for canned goods. But when 1864 came and went with a shocking lack of fireballs and chaos, Cumming performed a mental gymnastic routine that would score a perfect 10. He told everyone, "Oh, you guys thought I meant the physical world? LOL. No, I meant the spiritual world. The vibes are over, man." You can just picture his followers standing there, holding worthless apocalypse supplies, asking if they could get a spiritual refund. It was the ultimate read the terms and conditions defense, a move so slick you almost have to respect the sheer audacity of it. 2. In 1708, a group of French immigrants in London called the Prophets decided to promote the upcoming apocalypse with a little warm-up act. Their genius idea: resurrect one of their dead buddies, a Dr. M's, live in front of a paying audience. A massive crowd showed up, probably expecting the greatest show on Earth. Instead, they got the fire festival of the 18th century. Dr. Eames, the star of the show, apparently hit the snooze button on his own resurrection and refused to get up. The prophets were probably poking him with a stick, whispering, "Come on, man, you're making us look bad." The deceased doctor was clearly enjoying his eternal vacation from their nonsense. The prophets were left standing there, looking like idiots, while the crowd probably demanded a refund for the worst magic trick ever. 3. The year 1666 already had some seriously bad PR, what with the whole 666 thing. So when the Great Fire of London broke out, people's brains just short-circuited. Logic went out the window, and sheer, unadulterated panic took the wheel. Instead of grabbing buckets, a significant number of Londoners were apparently more concerned with giving the Lord Mayor an unsolicited scalp inspection, looking for horns. Imagine the mayor, trying to coordinate a city-saving effort while people are trying to part his hair like he's a show poodle. What was the plan even if they found them? Aha! Horns! Now what? Do we ask him to stop the fire with his devil powers? If Satan was watching, he was probably shaking his head thinking, "Guys, I delegate one little apocalypse and they turn it into a citywide game of I Spy." 4. Let me introduce you to Edgar C Whisnant, the undisputed Steve Jobs of getting the apocalypse wrong. This former NASA guy released a book, 88 Reasons Why the Rapture Will Be in 1988, and it sold millions. People quit their jobs and went on wild spending sprees. When 1988 ended and everyone was still stuck in traffic, did Whisenant apologize? Nope. He released a sequel for 1989. This wasn't a failed prophecy, you see, it was a day one patch. He probably just blamed a typo in the original manuscript of the Bible. He basically told the world, "You all believed in me wrong. Try again, but this time believe harder. And buy my new book for $19.95. His followers were the ultimate brand loyalists, willing to get burned twice. This guy could sell a ketchup popsicle to a woman in white gloves. 5. The Y2K Bug. For a brief, glorious moment, our biggest fear was that the world's computers would see the year E0 and just blue screen all of civilization. We were promised chaos, planes dropping from the sky, toasters rebelling against their owners, and ATMs launching money into the streets. People were hoarding toilet paper and canned beans like they were preparing to barter with Mad Max. Then the clock struck midnight. The world's computers didn't launch nuclear missiles. They just successfully loaded up millions of games of solitaire. The only real disaster was the millions of people who woke up on January 1st with a massive hangover and a garage full of useless emergency supplies. January 1st, 2000 was the single greatest day for garage sales in human history. 6. The 2012 Mayan Calendar thing was a masterpiece of global stupidity. People looked at an ancient calendar ending a cycle and thought it meant the whole universe was about to be deleted. It's like freaking out, because your wall calendar only goes up to December 31st, and concluding that time itself is over. Survival kit companies were making a killing, probably hoping the world would end just to validate their business model. You have to wonder what the ancient Mayans would think. They'd probably be like, "Dude, it's a calendar. We were just gonna go to the store and get a new one. Y'all need to chill." The only thing that truly collapsed that day was the credibility of a lot of History Channel documentaries and the bank accounts of people who bought gold from sketchy commercials. 7. Let's go way back to 156 AD to a group called the Montanists. These folks weren't messing around with vague predictions. They announced that the New Jerusalem, the actual city of gold from heaven, was scheduled to land in a specific dusty field in Phrygia. Their followers sold everything they owned, their goats, their houses, probably even their favorite sandals, and gathered at the designated landing spot. After a few days, the initial excitement probably turned into that awkward silence you get in an elevator that's stuck between floors. You can just picture them making excuses. Did God get the address wrong? Is there heavenly traffic? Did the angels forget the keys? The New Jerusalem was marked out for delivery, but never showed up, leaving them broke, homeless, and looking profoundly stupid. 8. Nostradamus was the king of prophecies, so vague they're like fortune cookies written by a lawyer. But for 1999, he tried to be specific, writing that a great king of terror would come from the sky. For centuries, this was his one clear shot, his Super Bowl prediction. The world went nuts, expecting a monster that made Godzilla look like a therapy lizard. And then July 1999 arrived. The great king of terror turned out to be nothing. The scariest thing to come from the sky that month was probably a pigeon with bad aim. The king of terror was likely just the Backstreet Boys releasing a new single, which, to be fair, was terrifying to some. This was the one time he didn't write in riddles, and he completely whiffed it, proving his real genius wasn't predicting the future, but in being so vague no one could ever prove him wrong. 9. The Shakers, a religious group known for their minimalist furniture and, well, shaking, basically invented the ultimate life hack for dealing with unwanted appointments. Just dance your way out of them. They confidently predicted the world would end in 1792. But when the doomsday clock was about to strike midnight and nothing happened, they didn't admit they were wrong. Instead, they claimed their intense, ritualistic dancing was so powerful and so impressive that God himself saw it and said, "You know what? Those moves are sick. I'll postpone the apocalypse." This is the divine equivalent of distracting a toddler with shiny keys. They essentially put the end of the world on snooze because their choreography was just too good. You have to wonder if other historical events could have been avoided with a well-timed Macarena. 10. In 1776, a young American named Jamaima Wilkinson got sick, claimed she died, and then announced her body was now being occupied by a genderless spirit called the Public Universal Friend. This is less of a divine resurrection and more like a celestial squatter refusing to leave the property. The friend preached the end of the world was nigh, and, most importantly, that it was now immortal. The followers bought it completely. But the universe has a funny way of beta testing immortality claims. In 1819, the Public Universal Friend got sick and, to the absolute shock of everyone, died. For real this time. The warranty on eternal life had apparently expired. It was the ultimate, "I'd like to speak to the manager" moment for her followers, but the universe's customer service line was permanently busy. 11. Long before we worried about comets hitting Earth, people in 1835 were terrified that Halley's Comet would just make everyone go crazy. The big scare was that toxic gases from the comet's tail would drift down and cause brain fever, a condition that sounds like it was invented by someone who already had it. The media hyped it up and people were genuinely panicking, probably eyeing their neighbors for any signs of comet-induced madness. Did you see how Bartholomew buttered his toast this morning? The comets got him. When the comet passed and everyone's brain remained at its usual, disappointing level of sanity, the only people left looking crazy were the ones who had boarded up their windows to keep the space vibes out. It turns out you don't need a comet to make people act nuts. We're perfectly capable of doing that all on our own. 12. Here's a story about a kid who accidentally became a weather god. In 1780, after a long drought, a boy in Worcester, England, claimed he could make it rain. He did his thing, and through sheer, dumb luck, it actually started raining. The town instantly hailed him as a prophet, but success went straight to his head. He went from being a humble rainmaker to a full-blown doomsday preacher, warning of a great flood that would wipe out all the sinners. He basically went from a local weather forecast to a biblical epic in the span of a week. When the day of the great flood arrived, it was bone dry. The town went from adoring him to probably wanting to give him the world's biggest wedgie. He learned a valuable lesson. When you get famous by accident, don't release a follow-up album. 13. If failed prophecies were a sport, Ronald Weinland would be the guy who shows up to every single game and loses spectacularly, yet still tries to sell you merchandise. This man wasn't just a one-time failure. He was a serial apocalypse predictor, calling for the end of the world in 2008, then 2012, then 2013, and then 2019. This isn't prophecy. It's like playing darts blindfolded and hoping you eventually hit the board. The hilarious twist to this story is that while he was busy failing to predict the end of the world, he successfully managed to predict his own personal apocalypse. He was arrested and sent to prison for tax evasion. In the end, the IRS turned out to be the one unstoppable world-ending force he couldn't see coming. 14. Joseph Smith, the founder of Mormonism, decided to make a prophecy with the confidence of a guy who thinks he has God's personal cell number. He declared that Jesus Christ would make his second coming within 56 years, and he even dropped the location pin. Missouri. Not Jerusalem, not Rome, but Missouri, a state known more for barbecue and Branson than for biblical events. You can almost imagine the angels in heaven looking at the plans like, "Missouri? Are you sure, sir? The traffic on I-70 is a nightmare." The 56-year deadline passed in 1891, and Missouri remained tragically free of any divine saviors. Maybe Jesus took one look at the humidity and decided to work from home. 15. Some historical failures are so epic, they get their own brand name. Welcome to the Great Disappointment of 1844. This isn't just a historical event. It's what happens when you order a steak and get a single sad piece of broccoli. A farmer named William Miller used some highly questionable Bible math to pinpoint the exact day of Christ's return. Thousands of followers, called Millerites, sold all their possessions and gathered on hillsides in white robes, waiting to be beamed up. The next morning, the sun rose, and they were all still there, broke, cold, and wearing ridiculous outfits. They then had to perform the ultimate walk of shame, going back to the towns they'd abandoned to ask for their old jobs back from the people who now owned all their stuff. 16. This might be the single dumbest prophecy in all of human history because it involves a chicken. In 1806, a hen in Leeds, England, started laying eggs with the message "Christ is coming" written on them. This wasn't just a prophecy, this was poultry-based viral marketing. People flocked from all over to see the holy chicken. But then, a suspicious local decided to investigate and made a horrifying discovery. The hen's owner was writing on the eggs with corrosive ink and then, with a level of dedication that is both impressive and deeply disturbing, forcing them back inside the chicken to be laid again. The prophet wasn't the hen. It was just a crazy lady committing fraud via chicken abuse. This story is the ultimate proof that if God has a message for humanity, he's probably not going to use a farm animal as a dot matrix printer. 17. Let's talk about the original Y2K panic, but for people who thought computers were just magic rocks. As the year 999 rolled over into the year 1000, a huge chunk of Europe collectively lost its mind. Led by whispers that Pope Sylvester II was some kind of dark sorcerer who had made a deal with the devil, people were absolutely convinced that the new millennium would be the world's grand finale. This wasn't just a vague fear, it was a continent-wide freakout. People gave away their property, packed the churches, and basically waited for the sky to crack open. Then, January 1st, 1001 arrived. The sun came up, the roosters crowed, and the only apocalypse was the massive collective hangover and the awkward realization that they now had to go find their donkeys and get back to work. 18. The Romans were masters of engineering and warfare, but when it came to prophecy, they were basically just superstitious jocks. One of their most enduring doomsday predictions was based on the legend of the city's founding. Romulus supposedly saw 12 eagles, and some genius decided this meant Rome would only last for 120 years, 1 decade per eagle. But when the 120-year mark passed, and Rome was still very much conquering everything in sight, they didn't abandon the prophecy. Oh no, they just kept recalculating it. Maybe it means 1,200 years. Or maybe the eagles were symbolic of something else, like pizza toppings. This is the ancient equivalent of hitting the snooze button on your own civilization's demise. It was a rolling apocalypse constantly being updated like a buggy software patch. 19. F. Kenton. Bashor was a pastor who approached Doomsday with the optimism of a professional gambler on a losing streak. He didn't just pick one date, he gave God a whole rapture window, a flexible time frame between 1988 and 2021. It's like telling your boss, "I'll finish that project sometime in the next 33 years." He argued this window was based on the biblical generation after Israel's founding. He even wrote a book called When, a question he spectacularly failed to answer. As the years ticked by, he just kept extending the deadline. When 2021 finally came and went, the only thing that ascended was the level of awkwardness for anyone who had bought his book. It turns out the answer to when was a very definitive, "Not on my watch, pal." 20. Let's talk about a guy whose prophecy was so bad, it actually came true in the worst way possible. A 16th century prophet named Melchior Hoffman declared that he would be imprisoned for 6 months in the city of Strasbourg, after which Jesus would return and make the city the New Jerusalem. So he dramatically rode into Strasbourg, expecting a short jail stay followed by a divine welcoming party. Well, he got the first part right. The city authorities immediately arrested him and threw him in jail. But the second part of the prophecy had some serious delays. Jesus was a no-show, and instead of a 6-month stint, Hoffman was left to rot in that prison for a full decade until he died. He basically predicted his own life sentence. Be careful what you wish for, I guess. 21. If you thought Hoffman was bad, his followers took it to a whole new level. A group of radical Anabaptists took over the German city of Minster in 1534, declaring it the official New Jerusalem and kicking out anyone who disagreed. Their leader, a former bartender named Jan of Leiden, quickly went from religious fanatic to full-blown lunatic. He introduced polygamy, crowned himself king of the entire world, and strutted around in fancy robes while his people starved. He was basically living out a deranged fantasy while waiting for Jesus to show up and vaporize all his enemies. Instead, a very non-divine army of the local prince-bishop showed up, besieged the city, and executed him and his followers in a brutally public fashion. It was the fire festival of religious rebellions. 22. In 1524, a famous German astrologer named Johannes Stifel looked at the stars and made a terrifying prediction. A rare alignment of planets in Pisces meant a second great flood was coming to wash away all of humanity. This wasn't some fringe conspiracy. This guy was a respected academic. Panic swept across Europe. People built boats. One German nobleman, Count von Igelheim, went full Noah and built a massive 3-story ark on the Rhine River. When the prophesied day arrived, a huge crowd gathered by the river. A light rain began to fall and the crowd panicked, stampeding towards the ark. In the chaos, the Count was stoned to death by the very people he was trying to save. The Great Flood never came. The only thing that got washed away was the Count's life and any respect for astrology. 23. Welcome to the internet's favorite doomsday, the gift that keeps on giving. The Nibiru Cataclysm. This is the eternal conspiracy theory about a rogue planet named Nibiru, or Planet X, that's on a collision course with Earth. The best part about Nibiru is its flexible schedule. It was supposed to hit us in 2003. Then, when that didn't happen, the date was conveniently moved to 2012 to piggyback on the Mayan calendar hype. Then it was 2017. Nibiru is the laziest planet in the universe. It's always on its way, but never seems to leave its cosmic couch. Believers are constantly finding new evidence, which usually involves blurry photos of lens flares. It's the ultimate apocalypse for people who want the world to end but also want the option to postpone it if they have other plans that weekend. 24. Richard Brothers was a former naval officer who, in 1795, decided he was done with ships and was now the nephew of the Almighty. That's right, not a son, a nephew. He was apparently God's weird cousin who shows up to holidays unannounced. He prophesied that on a specific date, he would be revealed as the ruler of the world, and London would be destroyed by an earthquake as his grand entrance. When the day came, there was no earthquake, and the only thing revealed was that Richard Brothers was completely bonkers. Instead of being crowned king, he was charged with treason and thrown into a lunatic asylum. You have to wonder what the family reunions in heaven are like. Oh, look, it's Richard. Try not to make eye contact. 25. In the 1840s, a preacher named Harriet Livermore became so famous for her fiery doomsday sermons that she was invited to speak before the U.S. Congress. 4 times. Let that sink in. While congressmen were debating taxes and tariffs, this woman was at the podium, basically telling the nation's leaders to stop worrying about the budget, because the entire planet was about to get deleted, no later than 1847. You have to imagine the Speaker of the House just shrugging and saying, "Well, it's better than another 3-hour speech about canal funding." The congressmen just sat there and listened politely, probably doodling pictures of fireballs in their notebooks. When 1847 passed and the world failed to implode, Harriet just kind of faded away. It's the ultimate political power move. You can't be wrong about your policies if you predict the entire country won't exist next year. Her approval rating was probably sky high because no one wanted to argue with the lady who might have God on speed dial. 26. Long before Nigerian prince emails, there was the Toledo Letter. This was a viral chain letter that spread across Europe in 1186, supposedly from a group of super smart astrologers in Toledo, Spain. It predicted that a massive planetary pileup in the sky would cause continent-destroying storms, earthquakes, and famine. It was the medieval equivalent of a fake news article shared on Facebook by your aunt, except instead of emojis, it caused mass hysteria. The panic was real. People dug underground shelters, which were probably just smelly holes in the ground where they huddled with their goats. When September finally arrived, the world held its breath. The result? Nothing. Not a single apocalyptic storm. The biggest disaster was the thousands of people who had to climb out of their dirt holes, covered in mud and goat droppings, and explain to their neighbors why they'd been living like gophers for a month. 27. Michael Stifel was a 16th-century German mathematician who became a die-hard Martin Luther fanboy. He decided to apply his math skills to the one book you probably shouldn't, the Bible. It's like using calculus to figure out a McDonald's secret sauce recipe. Using some seriously creative numerology, he calculated the exact moment of the apocalypse, 8 a.m. on October 19, 1533. He was so confident that he convinced his entire congregation to sell all their belongings and gather in a field to await their divine Uber. When 8 a.m. came and went, and the only thing ascending was the morning fog, his followers went from pious believers to an angry mob in about 5 seconds. They almost beat him to death. He learned a critical lesson that day. When you mix math and religion, you'd better be prepared to show your work, and your work had better be right, or the mob will grade your performance with pitchforks. 28. In 1831, when astronomers predicted a total solar eclipse over the United States, a lot of people didn't see it as a cool scientific event. They saw it as God hitting the dimmer switch before the final credits rolled on Earth. They latched onto a Bible verse about the sun being darkened before the final judgment and went into full-blown panic mode. In some cities, life ground to a halt. People were hiding in their homes, convinced that when the light came back, it would be accompanied by angels with flaming swords. The panic was real, People probably ate all their emergency pickles. Then the eclipse happened, it got dark for a few minutes, the birds got confused, and then it got light again. The sheer anticlimax must have been devastating. It was the universe's way of saying, relax, I just blinked. Can you guys not overreact for 5 minutes? 29. Here's a guy who tried to turn his own execution into a viral moment. In 1651, a Puritan preacher named Christopher Love was sentenced to death for treason. Standing on the scaffold, with the axeman probably tapping his foot impatiently, Love delivered a blistering final speech. He prophesied that God would unleash terrible plagues and disasters upon England for executing him, one of his chosen messengers. His followers were in the crowd, probably expecting lightning to strike the executioner. Instead, the axe fell, Love's speech ended abruptly, and England just kept on being England. No fire, no brimstone, not even a bit of drizzle. You have to wonder if God was watching and thought, Chris, buddy, we talked about this. No more dramatic threats. It was the ultimate mic drop, followed by complete awkward silence from the heavens. 30. Arise Evans was a Welsh tailor who moved to London in the 1650s and decided his real calling was being a prophet. His big mission, supposedly from God himself, was to personally warn King Charles IX about the impending apocalypse. The problem wasn't his prophecy, it was his delivery method. He repeatedly tried to bum rush the king's palace to deliver the message, but he kept getting tackled and thrown out by the royal guards. He was basically the world's first divine stalker, a celestial door-to-door salesman who couldn't get past the front gate. His prophecy never even got a chance to fail because he couldn't get past security. You have to imagine God watching from above, face-palming and thinking, I sent a message, not a restraining order. Next time I'm sending an email. His great failure was proving that even a message from God can get lost in the mail if the delivery guy is a maniac. 31. Meet Elkanah Bishop, an English preacher who, in 1758, became known as the Old Prophet by predicting London would be flattened by an earthquake on April 5th. This wasn't a small prediction. It caused one of the biggest panics in the city's history. Thousands of terrified Londoners fled the city, camping out in the surrounding fields like it was the world's most depressing music festival. People were selling spots on refugee carts for exorbitant prices, a kind of apocalyptic surge pricing. When April 5th came and London stubbornly refused to shake, the mood of the campers changed from fear to fury. The thousands of people who had fled returned to the city, found Bishop, and decided to give him his own personal earthquake. They nearly tore him limb from limb. He successfully predicted a panic, but failed to predict he'd be the star of it, and the main attraction would be him getting pummeled. 32. If you're looking for the most spectacularly awkward plot twist in Doomsday history, look no further than Sabatvi. In 1666, this Jewish mystic declared himself the Messiah, and people believed him. A huge portion of the Jewish world went wild, selling their homes and businesses to prepare for their return to the Holy Land. He was a rock star prophet with a massive following. Then, he was arrested by the Ottoman Sultan. The Sultan gave him a simple choice: convert to Islam or face a very painful, very public execution. And the Messiah, in a move that shocked literally everyone, chose Islam. It's hard to overstate the whiplash his followers must have felt. It's like finding out Santa Claus not only isn't real but now works for the IRS and is coming to audit you. It was the ultimate rug pull, a divine bait and switch that left his followers with nothing but canceled plans and a profound sense of spiritual cringe. 33. We're ending our list on a somber and profoundly tragic note, because not all failed prophecies are funny. Some are catastrophic. In the mid-1850s, the Xhosa people of modern-day South Africa were under immense pressure. British colonial expansion was relentless, their lands were being seized, and a new lung sickness was devastating their precious cattle herds. It was a time of desperation, and in desperate times, people will cling to any hope they can find. That hope came from a teenage prophetess named Nonkawuse. She claimed to have received a message from the spirits of their ancestors. If the Xhosa people slaughtered all of their cattle and destroyed all of their crops, The ancestors would rise from the dead, a new sun would dawn, and a powerful wind would sweep the white settlers into the sea. It was a promise of total renewal, a paradise regained. Believing this was their only path to salvation, the people obeyed. Between 1856 and 1857, they systematically killed an estimated 400,000 of their own cattle. But the ancestors never came. The sun rose, as it always did. And instead of paradise, the Xhosa were plunged into a famine of unimaginable scale. Tens of thousands of people, some estimates say up to 100,000, starved to death. Their society was shattered, their resistance broken, making it easier for the British to annex their land. This wasn't a great disappointment. It was a national suicide driven by a false promise, a horrific testament to how prophecies, when mixed with desperation and suffering, can lead to one of the darkest chapters in human history. That's 33 apocalypses that flopped harder than a fish on a trampoline. But here's the uncomfortable truth. People still fall for this stuff. So, be honest. Who in your life would 100% sell their couch and join the "End is Nigh" parade? Drop a fake name in the comments. Let's see how wild it gets. And hey, if laughing at history's biggest faceplants is your thing, smash like and join the cult. Subscribe.